Good evening, George. This is George Centeno.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm good. I have my video off because I'm in a car driving back from LAX, so I'm just going to leave it on audio until I get home.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Hi, Lisa.
Hello. Be on in just a minute.
Hello, Joanne and Michelle. Nice to see you signed in.
Good evening.
Good evening to you, George. Yeah.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Chair, I have a question.
Yeah.
There was a item on the agenda which was 10B.
Yeah.
Is that from September 2020 or 2021?
2021.
2021.
Why? Is there a typo in there?
No, the agenda said 2020. When I try to look it up in
Oh,
2021.
yeah. Yeah, that's a typo. 21, definitely. Hello, Mark Morgenstern.
Hi, George.
Thanks for joining.
You're welcome. Good to be here. Busy agenda.
Good evening, everyone.
Hey, Greg. Lisa, it's not quite 5:30, but have you heard from any commissioners about absences?
I have not. I will send an email to everybody just to make sure they're on the right link, on the right schedule.
Hello, Commissioner Ramirez. Welcome. Greetings, Deputy City Attorney Brandon.
Hi, good evening. How are you?
Good. Welcome, Commissioner Mota. We have a quorum, but I say we'll wait another minute or so, see who else is able to join us. Welcome, Captain Herrick.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes, we can. We're still missing Commissioner Cruz, Commissioner Devermont, Commissioner McLaughlin Basari, and Commissioner Scott. Welcome, City Attorney.
Good to see everybody.
Did send a meeting reminder to those that are absent with the link to the meeting. So.
Okay, thanks. All right, well, I say, why don't we go ahead and call the roll, Lisa, and we'll get the meeting started, and then we'll note when other commissioners join.
All right, away we go. Commissioner Basari McLaughlin. Commissioner Centeno.
Here.
Commissioner Cruz. Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Mota.
Here.
Commissioner Palazzolo.
Here.
Commissioner Rahman. I didn't hear you, but I saw you. I'm going to count that as official.
I can say here for her, if that helps.
You can't. Commissioner, there she is. She could say it for herself. Commissioner Ramirez. No, I thought we saw you.
I keep forgetting when I'm off my present.
There we go. Commissioner Scott, Vice Chair Devermont, and Chair Brown.
Present. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us again. For those of you who are not commissioners, and commissioners, of course, always thank you. Let's jump right in to our agenda. We've got a pretty full agenda. So we're going to start with item 3, study session. And Ms. Parson, why don't you call agenda item 3A and see if there's any public comment before we get started.
All right, agenda item 3A, a study of Smpd's use of body cameras and dash cameras. Are there any people interested in making public comment? We will have 2 minutes to speak.
No, 3A is Racial and Identity Profiling Act.
Oh, why don't you call it and I'll check what agenda I'm reading from.
Yeah, you're probably reading from the committee agenda from 2 days ago. All right, 3A is Racial and Identity Profiling Act, AB 953, discussion of requirements and status of Smpd compliance, reporting, and transparency. Presentation from Michelle Wittig. And let me just note before Ms. Wittig gives a presentation is I invited her to speak on this topic because she's been following the law since it was enacted and attending meetings and learning all about it and has good knowledge. I see that we also have Captain Bill Herrick here who has some knowledge about this act, and this won't be the only opportunity for us to hear from the department about their implementation of the act. But wanted to get started and give Ms. Wittig a chance to share her knowledge with the rest of us. So with that, please go ahead, Ms. Wittig.
Great, thank you so much. As Chair Brown said, I've been following the progress of the Racial and Identity Profiling Act since it was passed in 2015, back when Kamala Harris was our Attorney General. I attended the meeting at which the very first members of the Racial and Identity Profiling Act board were sworn in. So tonight I've been given the privilege to give you a summary of the law and its requirements. I'm not an attorney, and I'm certainly not a police officer, so I reached out to Smpd as I was preparing my remarks. And both Deputy Chief Derek Jacob and also Captain William Herrick gave me some feedback. But any mistakes are my own, and I hope that Captain Herrick will supplement what I have to say when I get to the portion that is about local implementation. But first, I want to give a little bit of background on the rationale for this law. My training is in cognitive psychology with a specialty in bias and even procedural justice. So I bring to this topic some expertise with respect to the rationale for the law. The purpose of the law is to promote fairness by forbidding what's called profiling in stops by police officers. So I'm going to have to summarize for you in brief 2 words, profiling and stops. Is essential to understanding the law itself. A stop, according to the law, means any detention by a peace officer or detention by a peace officer of a person or any peace officer interaction with a person in which the peace officer conducts a search, including a consensual search of the person's body or property in the person's possession or control. So in my own words, there are 2 components to stops. One is on those occasions when a peace officer detains a person, and that has a special meaning. And secondly, when a peace officer has an interaction with a person in which there is a search, either a consensual search or one that is not consensual because it has reason to be done by the officer. So a stop is not just a casual interaction or conversation with a police officer on your corner. It's got a specific definition, and that's important. The second term that we need to define here is profiling. What is profiling according to the law? I'll have to read it to you because it's long. Profiling is the consideration of or reliance upon, to any degree, actual or perceived race, color, ethnicity, national origin, and of half a dozen other identities. When you are deciding which persons to subject to a stop or in deciding upon the scope or substance of law enforcement activities following a stop, except that an officer may consider those characteristics when a specific suspect description has been given. So again, I'm going to give this to you in my own words. Profiling refers to the use of a group identity listed by the law as the basis for deciding whether to make a stop, and with respect to the actions that the officer takes after the stop, except if there has been a description of a suspect that the officer is responding to. So you get the difference between the two. Profiling is when you're in the absence of a description of a suspect, the officer more or less decides to make the stop based on group characteristics that are listed in the law. Okay, so what's the purpose of the law? It's to increase fairness by forbidding the use of those kinds of profiling intentions when an officer is making a stop. So let's ask ourselves, what kinds of reasons might there be for group-based disparities in the percentage of stops that an officer makes with respect to race or gender or sexual orientation? A lot of people don't realize that there are a variety of different reasons why there might be disparities. I'm going to tell you about three general categories. One is group differences in violation rates may account for disparities in stops. Group differences in driving rates, or group differences in the percentage of people who are present in a specific area that's being surveilled. So those are group-related factors. Then there's societal-based factors. There might be inequities relating to poverty, immigration status, etc., that account for some portion of the disparity in groups stops. But the ones that this law is targeting are what we call officer-related factors. These are the ones that we want to eliminate or reduce as much as possible. And they're factors that all of us are subject to, not just police officers. They go by two different names, implicit bias and explicit bias. Most people are familiar with the idea of explicit bias. That would be overt expressions of racist or bigoted beliefs or attitudes. They may be evidenced by posts on social media or symbols painted on walls or cruiser cars. Those explicit biases are the ones that most people are familiar with. But in recent years, many people have begun to become aware of the fact that there are also implicit biases. Now, the measurement of implicit bias is very controversial. It has a definition, though. Beliefs or attitudes that a person holds that can shape their understanding, their actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. They are often rooted in negative stereotypes about groups. Okay, so the goal of the law is to partition the variance in stops that police officers make into that part that is attributable to bias by the officer, separate from that part that is attributable to the other factors. That is not an easy task, but at least be aware of the fact that disparities do not prove bias. Disparities might even be absent when bias is present if there are factors that operate in the opposite direction. We don't need to go into all that, but be aware of the fact that disparities do not prove bias. So, in order to assess bias, there are some requirements of the law, and they relate to the officers having to record the perception of a person's race, gender, sexual orientation, etc., when that officer makes a stop. Now, I emphasize the word perception because the important point is not the actual race or gender or sexual orientation of the person, but the perception that the officer has. There are some very interesting statistical techniques that have been used to discern when disparities in stops might be a function of bias. And I'm just going to give you the name of one particular technique. It's called the veil of darkness. Some studies have been done to differentiate between stops that are made by police officers during daylight time versus darkness. The theory is that stops made under darkness are less likely to have been a function of the perception by the officer of the race of the target. So we don't need to go into all that, but just be aware of the fact that there are specific ways to address this. Now, what about the relevance of this law to policing equity? In summary, I'll just say that the law is intended to reduce the extent to which officer biases operate in the decision to make a stop and in the conduct following a stop, thereby reducing that portion of group disparities in stops that is affected by such biases. If successful, policing will then be more equitable. So let's think about how the data that's being gathered is going to be useful to our local police department. The law says that officers have to collect these data. It also requires that these law enforcement agencies like Smpd have to report the data to the California Attorney General's office on all the stops they make, whether vehicle or pedestrian. And also, an underappreciated part of the law is that it also requires that citizen complaints alleging racial and identity profiling also must be reported to the Attorney General. So we've got two things here. I'm going to emphasize the stops this evening, but the other part of it is very important, and that is that citizen complaints will now be reported to the Attorney General's office if they allege racial or identity profiling. It also established the Racial Identity Profiling Board, which meets 4 or 5 times a year, and various committees of that board, which I have attended over the last 5 years. Finally, it provides that data, best practices, and recommendations for community advocates, law enforcement, and policymakers are to be published in an annual report. So the RIPA board has already published 3 or 4 annual reports, and its 2022 report will be out in January. I won't go through the responsibilities of the RIPA board because my time is short. I'm going to get to the local implementation. This is where Captain Herrick really helped me out. I contacted him and said, I'm going to be summarizing how our local police department is implementing this new state law. It has 4 or 5 different subtopics, and I'm going to ask maybe Captain Herrick if he will supplement what I have to say if there's time. There are 18 different things that each officer must record on this handheld device out in the field when he or she makes a stop. I'm not going to list them, but you can imagine they are things like an identifier for the police officer, the perception that the officer has of the race, gender, sexual orientation of the person, and 15 other things. Incumbent upon the local department is to train police officers in how to do the data recording and the justification for it. I wrote to the Department of Justice and received a really nice set of PowerPoint slides. I think there's 72 in all that the trainers use to train local police officers in the rationale for the law, how to collect the data, and a little bit about what the data are going to be used for to convince the officers this is not just going on a shelf, it's actually going to be used. So Captain Harris is going to talk about officer training, data input, reporting, availability, and use. But I want to conclude my remarks with a set of recommendations. I think that this commission needs to ask, how is it going to engage with the RIPA goals? Should there be a standing committee of this body to monitor the data that will be coming back from Sacramento to Santa Monica after it has been collected and digested and put into a uniform data matrix? It will be able to be compared with other departments. Should the Inspector General be assigned an oversight role in analyzing and publicizing the data? One of the reasons for this law is to increase community trust in local policing. So we have to make sure that the data circle back to the community and is presented to the community in a manner that is digestible by the average person. Otherwise, why bother? It's nice for the police department to know about its disparities, but if the public is not engaged with the police in addressing those disparities, that part of the law that is designed to increase trust is going to come up short. Then I also want to mention another set of recommendations, and that is to engage with non-governmental groups to address bias. One of the things the law doesn't really talk about is what I call bias by proxy. The extent to which we individuals as community members might inadvertently engage in implicit bias when we have a call for service. When we pick up the phone or dial our iPhone and dial 911, that has to be addressed because it's very likely to be a source of the disparities in stops by police, because so many of the stops are in response to calls for service. And then my final recommendations are to invite Deputy Chief Derek Jacob, who I believe is in charge of the training of officers, to come and talk with you about the training. And also to ask Captain William Herrick to report on the vendor that our police department is hiring to help to maintain the integrity of the data. And also, hopefully, he'll talk a little bit about how the data are going to be made available to the public. So I'll stop there and apologize if I went over my time. And
Thank you.
Over to Mr. Herrick. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Wittig. So at this point, I want to just pause here and recognize that several people have joined the call. Chief Batista has joined us. Welcome, Chief. And we had a couple of commissioners join. Commissioner Devermont is on, Vice Chair Devermont is on, and Commissioner McLaughlin Basari is on. So Ms. Parson, if you could take note of that. Captain Herrick, thank you for joining. I wasn't planning to set aside time to have a full report from you. I know you have a lot of expertise and knowledge. But what I would invite you to do is just make a few comments on the state of implementation and things that you might want us to know as we just begin our process of thinking about this topic.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for the time. I do understand it was a short notice, and thank you, Michelle, for letting me join the presentation. There is quite a bit of information that I'll try to break down as quickly as possible in as digestible as possible way. And obviously in the future, I'll be more than happy to come back and do even more detail if that's really what the committee needs in the future. So As Michelle kind of covered, as RIPA established a requirement that all law enforcement agencies in California must meet. They must report these 16 data points that have sub-data points within them. These are listed in the law itself, in the RIPA Act of 2015. It's also listed on the RIPA's website, which is live. So I encourage anyone, a simple Google search would find the website. You'd be able to look up, and it explains quite a bit and offers those points. So I won't necessarily list them all now. But one thing I will say is these points are based on mostly the perception of the officer. That is what is very important. These are not things that we're specifically asking people, such as what is your race, what is your gender. It is the perception of the officer at the time of this stop, a stop which leads to some sort of search. Those are the very specific parameters under the RIPA. So because of this law, it's stated based on the size of the agency, we're required to start reporting to the RIPA Advisory Board, which is run through DOJ. We're required to report these 16 data points per stop by April 1st of 2023. But in order to meet that requirement, we have to start collecting the data January 1st of 2022, which the department is on track to meet that requirement. Michelle List kind of referred to the training that was provided by the DOJ. They have actually given a lot of help and guidance and really showing an agency how to go live. So the basic of it is that the DOJ has established a web portal in which any agency can use to submit the data annually. The Santa Monica Police Department, we have chosen to use a third-party vendor, which is approved by the DOJ, a company called Lefta Systems, L-E-F-T-A, for those taking notes. And we're specifically using this Lefta company is a system that we have used for a while in our training program. We have a long-standing relationship with the company. They offer almost a kind of cafeteria type set of different programs that do several different things, and this RIPA program is just one of them. This program is called PASS, P-A-S-S, which stands for Profiling Accountability Solution Software. And it's specifically designed for RIPA to report these 16 data points. Makes it very simple. It's kind of hard to mess up or miss any of these points. And we've already agreed, we already had a contract with Lefta for other systems, so it was very easy for us to adopt this program. Currently, in the month of December, we are beta testing it. We selected 8 officers and have been using this to submit at least 100 samples to Lefta to make sure that we would run it. But come January 1st, we'll be able to go live and the officers will be able to use it. The web-based system that allows the officer to log into, after conducting a stop, they can log into the system via a work issued phone or one of the work computer tops and document their the stop, fill in the data points. With many of them are check the box or drop down menus or limited narration. They will enter the information that they perceive per stop. It will be submitted to Lefta. Lefta then will maintain that data. Or I'm sorry, let me go back. When the officers create this data entry, right? When they enter the stop into the system, they actually have to put their supervisor in there. It goes to the supervisor to review. The supervisor has no ability to edit or change what the officers have put in. The sergeant are there to review the information, make sure no personal data, i.e. identifying data of the person stopped, is in the report, i.e. a person's name, their date of birth, their specific address. None of that is to be reported to the DOJ. It's anonymous in terms of the person that was stopped, other than the data points that they're looking at. Once a supervisor authorized, basically signs off, as we would refer to it, then it would be entered into the Lefta system. The RIPA mandates require that we make this report annually. Our very first one, as I said before, will be April 1st of 2023. The Santa Monica Police Department, we've already planned that we're actually going to present it to DOJ quarterly. We'll lump the information per quarter, review it, submit it to DOJ, kind of makes it a little more digestible, allows us to look at the information ourselves. another reason we want to use the pass system. It gives us the ability to have the information ourselves. Really, with the DOJ web portal, we could create a profile for each individual officer and just directly submit it to DOJ, but then we would have to wait at the end of the year for them to create their own report. By using pass, we can kind of look at that information, learn from it, see if there's training things we need to address or other issues that may be identified. It also will give us the ability to post the information on our website. I've already talked to the deputy chief about this. What we'll do as we submit quarterly, we will also put that information on our website, part of our desire to be transparent. We kind of post similar stuff now, but this will be a little more detailed. And again, each quarter makes it a little more digestible instead of looking at the whole year. And of course, RIPA themselves put out the data on their website. Other agencies have already started reporting. The larger agencies had to start reporting sooner. So you can, like I said, you can go on there now, kind of take a look at their information. So I'm sorry, I'm running out of time, George.
Yeah, I was going to just move to questions. I really appreciate that input, and maybe we'll take a few questions from commissioners.
Sure.
And you can follow up with those questions. So
Sure.
Any questions from the commissioners? Okay, Commissioner Miller.
First, thank you, Chair. First, just let me say how much I appreciate the presentation from both Professor Wittig and from the police captain. And Michelle, you truly are an expert in this field, and you've provided very helpful expert testimony, and I'm really grateful for it. This is also just really, it's all good news. The law is good news, and what these two individuals have just presented to us, I take as very good news as well, and really holds promise for greater trustworthiness and therefore greater public trust when it comes to policing. Three quick questions. One is just a clarifying comment. A reference was made to citizens' complaints, and I want to just assure for any non-citizens who may be listening that the law members of the public as opposed to the citizen status.
I think they're called external complaints. External complaints. That's the term.
Very good. And then two questions to both the captain and Michelle. Question number one is just hearkening back to Vice Chair Devermont's committee and some of what has been discussed there, and the issue of a degree of selectiveness on what complaints are actually taken in. So go ahead, Chair.
Try to tie this to RIPA, otherwise we'll deal with it in the next agenda item.
Great. Then the question is, does any of the procedural issues that came up from the Vice Chair's committee relate to data collection or maybe the lack of data collection with regards to RIPA? So if I'm off the mark, just tell me. But let me put my second question out, and then I'll stop and turn it back over for answers. I'm very interested in what point in the stop is the data recorded? Because it seems to me that it's the initial impression that might reveal the bias or lack of bias, as opposed to the impression the officer has after a degree of interaction. So if the data is presented based on the greater familiarity from the greater interaction, that might hide the bias that led to the initial stop. So if we could get some clarification on at what point in time is this data entered. That's all I got, Chair. Thanks so much. I appreciate hearing the answers.
Yeah, I'll defer to Captain Herrick.
So the RIPA does not mandate a specific time following the stop that it must be done. However, we've already kind of established our protocols, which is obviously, ideally, it would be as practical and near the time of the stop, depending on what's going on, right? Things could be fluid, but regardless of what takes place, the officer will be required at a minimum to complete the report prior to their end of shift. So again, the stop has to do with a stop that resulted in a search. So depending if there's an arrest, if there are things seized, these are also a part of the data points. So depending on what is happening, that could delay the time, but at a minimum, they have to report it before the end of their shift, if that makes sense.
Yes. Thank you. I want to thank both Captain Herrick and Ms. Wittig for this very helpful background information, and we definitely will invite you back and perhaps invite Captain Jacob back to tell us more about it as things roll out. All right, we're going to move on. First, want to recognize that Commissioner Scott and Commissioner Cruz have joined. So welcome. Ms. Parson, can you call agenda item 3B?
Agenda item 3B, Accountability System Standing Committee, status of committee work, discussion of improvements to complaint intake, tracking, and reporting. Information needed from Smpd, potential assignments for Inspector General, and ongoing committee agenda and schedule. And I will pause here for any public comment.
Okay, no public comment. All right, I'm going to turn this over to Vice Chair Devermont, who's chair of the Accountability Systems Standing Committee. And as the agenda item says, basically, bring us up to date on what's going on and what the goals are and what information you need and who you need it from.
Thank you, Chair Brown. Remind me, because I've been in so many meetings, have I briefed this commission on the meeting that our committee had regarding complaint systems? Have I done that yet? I'm wondering if I just have to cover one or both.
I don't believe so.
Okay. So we had, I'll start there. We had in November a meeting regarding complaint systems and processes. At this meeting, we had Craig Haney of Internal Affairs and Sergeant Williams appear. Both were patient, answered our questions. Sergeant Williams in particular seemed very open to suggestions. The issues that we primarily focused on is not so much complaints taken over the phone, not so much complaints received online, but more so the primary focus tended to be with complaints in person. There seemed to be, from what we could tell, either a lack of specific process for someone who comes in to complain, to issue a complaint in person. Although it seems to be that the person at the front desk should immediately go and get a supervisor. It was unclear whether that was written in stone in policy. And there are two videos online, one dating back, I believe, to 2018 or 19, one as late as April of this year on YouTube, which I will be putting in a report, by the way. Specifically, someone's walking up and saying, is there a form I can fill out to file a complaint? And one, that person's told, no, you can only do it online. And the second and more recent, it appears that person is just handed a form. Here's how you do it. I can't help you. There's no form. And the first, it seems to be the earlier one, it seems to be a little more confrontational. And the latter one, I do have to give credit. That officer, I won't name that officer, immediately gets a supervisor, specifically says, and very professionally so, I don't want to say anything to dissuade you from filing a complaint. I'm going to go get my supervisor. Even when the people who are asking to issue the complaint are saying, well, if you just do this, if you just do that, that officer rightfully says, I don't want to do anything to be seen as dissuading you. I'm going to go get my supervisor. And does so, rightly so. But as I said, is incorrectly informed that there is there's no way to fill out a form to issue a complaint at that date in person. I'm trying to think which is the best way to go with this right now. Okay, I'll just go to this. It also, one of the issues we also had related is the idea that when the supervisor comes out in person, that supervisor right there, who may or may not be an expert in Smpd policy, some are more informed than others, deems solely whether there is an issue regarding the policy itself, whether there is an issue for complaint, and then either gets rid of it, says, oh, there's no issue here, or takes the complaint and then decides what to do with it. In our view, or in the commission's view, and we will be issuing a report, a proper procedure or a better procedure with less implications for perceived or actual bias would be somebody walks in, says, I wish to file a complaint. Supervisor comes out, says, here's the form. That form, the form now supposedly is basically just a blank form that doesn't really have any real instructions. The form that our accountability committee will be issuing or will be recommending in some form will have a set of specific questions. Is your complaint concerning a specific officer? Do you feel there's been misconduct? Is this an officer of Smpd? Et cetera, and then a narrative portion. That supervisor, in our view, would then take that complaint and not immediately, but eventually turn it over to internal affairs to look at, thereby relieving the officer, the supervisor, of any responsibility for the handling of the complaint, and therefore any appearance of bias, true or otherwise. It also appeared that with regards to people who come in to issue a complaint that are deemed to be not of a policy related complaint, that those are kind of done away with without any tracking system. In our form in the form we would like to see created, every person would obviously write the complaint on a form if they can. That form they would receive a copy of that form. That form would have a tracking number. Now, while officer protections would obviously apply, privacy protections, that person would be able to look up and see, is that complaint pending or whether there has been a disposition. Obviously, privacy protections would apply. They might not know whether there's been a suspension. They might not know if there's been a punishment, but they should be able to see whether that complaint has been sustained or whether it's still pending. I'm just looking. It was also unclear, we didn't cover it much, whether the filing of a 1983 action against an officer immediately sparks an investigation. For those that don't know, 1983 is a section of the U.S. Code that is used for lawsuits involving civil rights violations. Most commonly, these are made against officers. It is unclear as to whether if I or somebody files a lawsuit, a civil rights action against an officer as a defendant in the department, whether Internal Affairs immediately picks that up and says, we need an investigation to see if there actually is misconduct, or is that simply handled on the city attorney's side? Maybe Chief Batista and Mr. City Attorney Lawrence can expand on that today if they so choose. I'm not sure if they were prepared to answer that question. Something that came up that was troubling, I thought, some time ago in one of our earlier commission meetings, Chief Seabrooks came in and said to us when we were investigating the unrest of last year, Smpd's response in the OIR report. And it is my understanding that Chief Seabrooks said that she estimated about 15 people arising out of the 2020 unrest were disciplined for body cam violations. Mr. Haney and Sergeant Williams informed us that all resolved complaints that were either externally, which were either commissioned externally or internally, started internally, externally, that were resolved would be found on that website. Mr. Haney informed us that everything from 2020 had been resolved, and therefore all complaints would be on that website. it's showing whether they were sustained or not in a very brief narrative. It appears from that website, and I might be missing something in the process, it appears from that website that exactly 0 officers were disciplined for body cam violations arising out of actions that occurred in the year 2020. So that is disconcerting to say the least. Not just that perhaps 0 were, although the OIR report, I believe there were up to 80 that didn't have their body cams activated, but also that the chief would come here and say that when it quite possibly, unless I'm missing something, I might not be accurate. We recently had.
Commissioner Devermont, can I just clarify? So your committee is preparing a recommendation relating to the handling of complaints, including a proposed form. Is that fair to say?
I'm debating. I don't know if I'll be making the proposed forms or just setting out the specific guidelines that should be followed. Or the committee has empowered me to write this and represent their beliefs. I will be doing so, and we will also be doing one for the body cams meeting, which I was about to go into.
And you'll bring that to us.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I want you to finish, but I'm just saying you'll bring that to the commission when it's ready.
Of course, the commission has to vote, and then we will send it, obviously, to the relevant parties, City Council, Smpd, and everyone who is involved, and give everyone an opportunity to respond. I would think. I'm prepared to take questions on the complaint systems meeting now, or I can go straight into the body cams meeting and take all questions at the end, whichever this commission prefers.
Well, I think what we'd like you to do is finish telling us what's happening with the committee and what's going to happen going forward. You did tell us at the last meeting some of the topics, but maybe you can remind us also.
Okay, so at the last meeting, you mean the body cams meeting that we just had? We had a body cams meeting. We had a meeting on dash cams and body cam usage. That was this week. We had a Sergeant Sumlin appear. I do have to say that Sergeant Sumlin appears to be, if he is professional in the field and in the department as he was during our meeting, he is a credit to Smpd and a model for how officers should be. He was extraordinarily patient, extraordinarily clear, open to suggestions, very, very, very courteous and friendly and respectful. I was very, and I believe the rest of the committee was very impressed with Sergeant Sumlin. I believe him to be a credit to Smpd. We learned a lot about the body cams, so not just the ones that Smpd currently uses, but the ones that they will soon be implementing. Apparently, the newest, most technologically advanced ones are waiting on a ship, like everything outside the harbor. But Smpd is expecting them shortly and will be using them. Some incredible things we learned. For instance, if one body cam is activated, all officers in the near surrounding area around that incident, their body cams will automatically be activated. What I will tell you a few things that will be coming up in the report. It appears in the policy at 425.4 that there are instances where officers traffic officers on a motorcycle might have limited circumstances where they may not be required or may not have access to body cam in their investigations and their traffic citations. Obviously, I think that that's something that's probably easily fixable. It's regarding going to or from home. I obviously feel that the body cam should be active at all points. Another thing that came up, let me start it with this. There are certain crimes where there are extensive privacy protections that don't necessarily apply, or victims that don't necessarily apply to other crimes. Most crimes involving sexual assaults are those, to minors and adults alike. I believe certain domestic violence crimes carry those protections. So officers, when they had their body cams, they came in contact with a rape victims who obviously just suffered that trauma, they might turn their body cams off for that interview. However, and someone said this was the training, Sergeant someone said this was the training and consistent with the policy. I looked at the policy. I have a different reading of it, although I do trust Sergeant someone. Sergeant someone said that the training is, and his belief is, that if an officer has discretion as to when to turn his body camera on or off when involved in an enforcement stop or an investigation of a crime, even if that crime does not involve statutorily protected, one of the crimes that have statutorily mandated privacy protection. He stated that if a victim of an assault, not a sexual assault, but a standard assault in an alley, said, "Hey, can you turn that off?" that it was in the officer's discretion to do so. I think that's probably not in the best interest of the community for an individual officer to have discretion as to when they feel, because it's kind of a lax, fluid internal standard. When they feel it is appropriate to turn the body camera on and off, I think sticking with a strict policy on this would be good. And I believe that's about it.
What's up next for the accountability committee? And what
So
information
I
do
do
you
want
need from the
also
department?
want to give, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I do want to give credit to Chief Batista, Lieutenant Flores, and Assistant Chief, or I can't remember the exact title, but Deputy Chief Derek. I can never remember his last name. I do apologize. All have Chief Batista shaking his head at me. All of these people have been very, very helpful, even when the requests have sometimes come last second. They have over the weekend. They've been very helpful in securing us guests. They've been very accommodating. The next meeting will be regarding decertification. The meeting after that will revolve around Brady evidence. I think it would probably be good for the Brady evidence one to have a city attorney, Lawrence, there. I can get the exact dates. I got them written down here. We're working on guests and specifically what we will want those guests to answer and not answer, what will be expected. Chief Batista has reached out to me saying, obviously, the more specific, the more he can help us. That's totally reasonable. I'm very much looking forward to the meeting revolving Brady evidence. I think there's going to be a lot there, specifically as to whether a quote-unquote Brady list is kept by Smpd or the Santa Monica City Attorney's Office, whether it's possible to give notification of Brady evidence at the arraignment, the very first appearance. I think that is ideal. Also, Smpd's and Santa Monica's cooperation with the District Attorney's Office, George Gascon's District Attorney's Office, in providing that Brady evidence in a timely manner. And I am hoping to have Diana Turan, Deputy District Attorney Diana Turan there. She is heading up, I believe, the Brady evidence team for Los Angeles County District Attorney Gascon. All right, Mr. Chair, unless there's questions.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I just have, I'm going to move us along. I just have one question and one quick comment. Question is, what is the date, the next committee meeting for your committee?
I got it in front of me. So the next date on decertification, I'd like to have, once again, Mr. Haney, possibly Chief Batista, or a representative, is on December 20th at 5:30. The meeting on Brady evidence is on January 10th at 5:30.
Okay, and then my comment is for your committee to consider is before we finalize recommendations, I think it would be useful to get the response of the department, but before you finalize what the recommendation is, because they may have a very good reason why why they see things differently or the same or whatever. So, and I don't know how best to do that, but I think that should be a goal of all our committees.
I don't disagree. I think that's probably in the best interest of the community and the commission and all the parties involved. I guess the question would be, after my report or my committee's report is done, do I send it straight to Smpd to get their input, then alter it, or do I have the commission approve it and then we send it?
I don't think there's any perfect way to do it. Just we all need to be thinking about how can we do that, and maybe Chief Batista and others, you guys can think about how best you think it would work to get your input as our committees are meeting and talking about things.
On that note, I'm happy to hear any input or questions, should there be any.
Yeah, well, I'm going to move us to the next agenda item, unless there's really a burning question from a commissioner. All right, seeing none. Yes, please, Chief. Yeah.
So just a quick question on that particular topic, because when I hear what's being discussed and formed, I just want to make sure that there's an opportunity. Obviously, once you create a report, for example, is that something that comes to us and then we have an opportunity to discuss or explain what the reasons are behind what we're doing, as well as, for example, make additional recommendations to what's being suggested? Because just in listening to Mr. Devermont's narration of some of our processes, I could identify areas where I think, well, I think that not only could we do that, but I think we could also strengthen that by doing this. So where in this process will we have the opportunity to collaborate in that manner?
Yeah, that's the question we need to figure out, but I do think that's really important. Just take the complaints, for example. I think what we've heard and what several people have observed is that the complaint system really needs to be improved and made more robust, more systematic, better form, tracking, more transparency. And so I think that before we finalize a recommendation about that, we need to find a way of getting your input on that and everything else we're doing. And I don't want to have to I don't think we can dictate that it will always be done the same way. Just we'll have to I'll leave it to the creativity of our various committee chairs to figure out how best to do that.
Okay.
But it is a goal.
Right. No, that's a great idea, and I totally understand that we have to have flexibility in it. But I just wanted to, and here's the part where I've got to make sure that we create a record of this, and that is that the Santa Monica Police Department used to have a reporting mechanism much like what we are having a discussion about today, where there was a form and the person filled out the information and submitted it. The department at some point, 7 to 10 years ago, however long it was, had the forethought that why do we need a form when we are willing to take this complaint in any absolute form that is available? It could be a napkin, it could be online, and it could be any way. So I guess I just want to make sure that it is understood that the department had a system like a form, but then thought, we don't need a form. We are going to be able to take a complaint in any way that it comes our direction. And perhaps it's not always just about creating a form, but what I've identified in this conversation is that we should be perhaps reviewing with our officers and our sergeant personnel what the procedure is for taking a complaint so that there's more uniformity across our ranks and understanding how it is that the process happens, right? So I don't want to belabor the point. I just wanted to make sure that I created a record saying, hey, the Santa Monica Police Department had a form 7 to 10 years ago, decided to move forward in a way that allows us to take a complaint in any capacity that the person can get it to us. So definitely look forward to ongoing conversations on how we can get even better. Thank you.
Great. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, may I quickly respond?
Sure.
Chief Batista, I'm happy if it's okay with members of this commission, and obviously I would have to make the communications would be open to the public, to send you my report for your input before I send it to the whole commission, and then take your input and issue a finalized report, taking SMPD's SMPD's input into account. If that works for the commission and for you, sir.
That's great that you give us the opportunity, but obviously it's up to the commission's decision on how they want to proceed. But yes, we'd be open to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to move us on to the next agenda item. Ms. Parson, can you read what I believe is 3C?
3C, the Protest and Crowd Management System Standing Committee, discussion of goals and agenda. Information needed from SMPD, potential assignments for Inspector General, and schedule for meetings.
Are there any members of the public that have signed up to speak on that one? No? Okay. And so I'm going to turn this over to Commissioner Scott, who chairs the Protest and Crowd Management System Standing Committee. And really what we're looking for here is, information about what's planned, what the topics are, what information you think you might need from the department or from the Inspector General.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. First off, I would like to apologize for my tardiness. As you know, this is a voluntary assignment, and having said that, I'm so sorry, but I did have a parent conference that ran late, so apologies for that. I am here. So with respect to our protests and crowd management systems, we would like to go ahead and proceed in really trying to address issues and try to bring about change. So what we're looking at, in case some of the folks who are on here did not have a chance to look, we're looking at having monthly meetings, 1 hour in length, on the fourth Wednesday of every month. But again, I am going to run that also past the standing committee so we can chat a little bit further regarding the time length and the day. I try to be mindful of the other meetings that are held in the city. But anyways, having said all that, with session 1, I'm targeting for Wednesday, December 22nd. The topic will be current law and policies regarding lawful protests. All of these meetings, by the way, are listening sessions, right? Because that's what we're here for right now. Information gathering, and then once we've gathered all of the information, if needed, we could make a recommendation or not. But it's really a matter of information gathering so we understand what all the current policies that are at play, and if there is any type of room for improvement, and if so, what that improvement might look like. So having said that, again, with this first listening session, we're going to explore current policies surrounding lawful protests and how that's enforced. We're looking again to gain insight on policies regarding the use, and this one specifically, of body cameras and how that policy is enforced. And this is again with respect to protests and crowd management, right? What is the policy regarding carrying spare batteries for body cameras? Because we know that also turned to be one of the topics was, oh, there were some cameras that the battery power was low or it went out, and that might have been a reason why that camera wasn't turned on. So that's just one piece of this current policy and procedure, but we're also going to look at it from an accountability perspective. We're also going to explore the role of the emergency response and third-party agencies working in tandem during the protest, just to, again, ensure that measures are in place to avoid creating situations that precipitate additional confrontation, right? So I'm hoping in this session, recommended presenters would be our city attorney, a representative, perhaps you, Chief Bautista, or someone from Smpd, along with emergency response team representative, as well as a member from ACLU or comparable outside agency, as well as our Inspector General. Again, with the Inspector General, we're hoping that they can provide current policies in comparable cities. Again, we're information gathering on each of these sessions with the hopes of maybe there is a recommendation or maybe there isn't, but the whole thing is let's really come to understand what the policies are. The next topic is session 2. Again, I have it tentatively scheduled for January 26th And I'm sorry, let me go back and say, I'm looking at these meetings being from 6:30 to 7:30. Okay. Again, so session 2 is unlawful protests. Again, listening session, exploring the protocols that are required to declare a protest unlawful. We want to again look at the current policies surrounding what are the required variables that determine when a peaceful protest is no longer lawful. How are these policies created? How often are they amended? What are the laws on state and national levels? Again, information gathering, recommended presenters, and we're probably usually looking at similar protocol and who the presenters are. Again, in this one, city attorney, again, someone from Smpd, if not Chief Bautista, someone else. Emergency response team, again, ACLU, comparable outside agency, as well as the Inspector General. Again, this is on unlawful protests. The next session, session 3, Wednesday, February 23rd. Topic, unlawful protest policies. Listening session expires. What is the policy currently in place regarding, again, when it's declared unlawful? Because we figured that this is going to be one of those that overlays into the next session. So I'm trying to provide room around that. And then in the event too that say we have, once that meeting has elapsed and we've exhausted the discussion on that, then of course, yes, we move on to the next topic. But either way it goes, we'll be really flexible in how we do these sessions. Again, so like I said, that one is a continuation. Session 4 is dated for March 23rd. Topic, rules and policies regarding the use of curfews and the safe exit plan that is currently in place. Again, what happens once a protest has been declared unlawful? How is the contingency plans in place to ensure overall safety of not only the protesters or law enforcement, but also community members and local businesses? And in this meeting specifically, I would like to, in addition to having the city attorney, Smpd, emergency response team, and Inspector General, local business owners. I think this is the opportunity to hear from business owners their thoughts on what would be good safety plans, what their experiences were in our protests and what they have been in all of the protests, making sure once again that they understand what the contingencies that are in place and how that affects them, how communication affects. And so also I think we should also look at someone from the Chamber of Commerce and also discussing how, again, that, how they ensure that all of the businesses have that plan, how the communication is there. Session 5, the date is April 27th. Topic, notifications to businesses of protest activity. Again, this is an overlap into that one. We're going to do a deeper dive again, and I have on here inviting the Chamber of Commerce, local business owners, community members, just exploring a little bit deeper because, again, we only have an hour. So if we start to discuss it in one, we have that overlapping in that second session to really take a deeper dive. And I'll repeat it again. As far as how we look at what concludes at the end, if it appears that there's a solid contingency plan in place or even a communication plan in place, that's good. But if we see that there is room for improvement, we will collaboratively in our standing committee first create what we think could be some recommendations. We bring it back to the commission, and then the commission decides, how we could either amplify it, tweak it, or whatever, and then that is then presented to City Council. So that is the life cycle of any recommendations that may bubble up out of these listening sessions. And then for session 6, it's actually divided into miniature sessions itself because section 6 goes into crowd management tools. Now we're going to have listening sessions looking specifically at the various tools. So the first date on that is May 25th, and then it goes into, we look into tear gas is section 6A, which is dated for June 22nd. Pepper spray, July 27th. projectiles, August 24th, and flashbang grenades, September 28th. Again, we're looking to still have our same recommended presenters, city attorney, Smpd, emergency response team, ACLU or comparable agency, inspector general to also always provide the current policies in comparable cities, as well as community members. Again, when we need to look, when we talk about the community management tools, the crowd management tools, what is it that's being used by law enforcement and third-party agencies to subdue unlawful protesters? And this is also, when we look at the recommendations based on the OIR report, that will also be taken into consideration as we talk about the tools that have also been deactivated and or implemented to assist with de-escalation. And then our final session would be session 7, and that goes into de-escalation policies for lawful protests. Another listening session where we discuss the frequency of de-escalation training, how successful the training outcome is measured, as well as what else what else is left there to maybe amplify in that whole de-escalation process. Again, recommended presenters, city attorney, Smpd, emergency response team, ACLU, comparable agency, and also the inspector general. Now, I will say also with the caveat, in speaking back with the standing committee, we can also be flexible in moving perhaps some of these sessions order based on how they overlap or overlay into the next topic. And with that, I'll yield my time back to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Scott. Let me just ask you, I believe you've got a written document that reflects all of this. Is that correct?
I do, yes. And I was actually in the package for this evening as well, but yes, I do.
Good. I'm going to ask that maybe you update it from time to time, and we'll attach it to agenda so that the community and everybody who's paying attention can keep track as things go along. And I assume it might change, for example, over time.
Absolutely, yes. I'll keep it updated. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Parson, let's call the next agenda item. Thank you, Commissioner Scott.
Agenda item 3D, Reimagining Public Safety Standing Committee, discussion of goals and agenda, information needed from Smpd, potential assignments for the Inspector General, and schedule for meetings. Taking a break to look for any public comment on this item and seeing none.
Okay. Commissioner Miller is the chair of this committee. And Commissioner Miller, you've seen how this is going. I'll just turn it over to you to hold forth.
Well, great. Well, first of all, let me just say, woe is me for being the committee chair that needs to follow that presentation that we just heard from Commissioner Scott. Terrific presentation. I'm not as far along in the development of the committee plans, but I think I can do good justice to the topic. I did want to, well, I think in the interest of time, well, I'll just dive in. I'd like to outline the priority subjects that I'm planning on having our committee explore. And I welcome comments from committee members and non-committee members and comments, supplements, additions or subtractions from these suggested topics. For all topics of this committee's meetings, we will request that Smpd policies relevant to the topic of the meeting be provided by the city attorney, Smpd, and or the inspector general. We will also seek internal and external experts to present on each topic. And I want to particularly emphasize this point. We are not going to approach any of these topics with predetermined outcomes. Our job is really to explore, to fact find, and to try and develop policy suggestions. So I think it's important that, and I just want to make clear, I have no predetermined outcomes for these topics. I have great interest and energy behind the topics, but it's an exploration. It's not a an attempt to reach a predetermined outcome. The first meeting of the Reimagining Public Safety Committee will be held in January. The date will be determined. We will determine the committee's ongoing schedule at our January meeting, and the frequency of the committee's meetings I also intend to have as a discussion item during the January meeting. We will then hold discussions on each topic and gather information from the Smpd, the Inspector General, community members, and experts. We will collaborate on recommendations that will first be submitted to the full committee and then to other appropriate parties such as the City Council, the City Manager, or the Police Chief, as the case may be. Here are the 4 initial topics that our committee will be exploring. Topic number 1, routine traffic stops. And as subtopics to that, or some of the subtopics to that, I'm sure there will be others, is there an opportunity to reimagine this function in such a way as to reduce the frequency of split-second life and death decision-making on the part of police officers and members of the public? To what extent does current training of Smpd officers involve officers being sensitized to the fears of motorists? Is there merit in creating a program, sort of a ride along in reverse? Are there other means of bringing the motorist's experience to police officers, much as we know we so value the opportunity to ride along with police officers and get a sense of their daily experience? What innovations have been pursued in other cities? And we have a great resource in our own city manager who did engage in experimentation on this topic in the city of Berkeley and has valuable input for us, no doubt. I'm sure the chief does as well. And what possible creative innovations have yet to be pursued in any jurisdiction? That will be the focus of our January meeting. The second topic that our committee will be addressing is homelessness and the unhoused. And subtopics of that will certainly include: what is Smpd's current approach to homeless individuals? What is Smpd's approach to deterring homeless encampments on city streets, parks, and beaches? What role does Smpd play in connecting homeless individuals to housing and other services? What role can Smpd play in avoiding the further stigmatization and dehumanizing of homeless individuals? And I don't mean to suggest for a second that our police department contributes to those sentiments. The inquiry is, what steps can Smpd help the community as a whole to avoid those false interpretations and false descriptions of the homeless population? And of course, related to that, how can Smpd help convey that homelessness itself does not equal criminality? And lastly, that broad topic that we've all heard so much about and is being explored in many municipalities, and many municipalities have taken good steps on this, including ours, police response versus mental health response. And obviously there's a huge amount of topics that fall under that, but I think we all kind of have a general understanding of sort of that collection of issues. The third topic the committee will be prioritizing is alternative approaches to actual and perceived threats to safety. What is the truth about the crime rate in Santa Monica versus the perception? And big props to our new chief for having spoken very clearly on this topic just recently and to the media, sort of dispelling this notion that we have rampant violent crime in Santa Monica, which we in fact do not. Do more police officers on the street equal greater public safety? What alternatives besides the presence of police officers can be employed to create a better sense of public safety? How do we make our beaches and parking lots feel safer? Are there alternatives and less expensive approaches to creating a public safety presence beyond sworn officers? The fourth topic that will be a priority for our committee is police officers on school campuses. What has been the subtopics to include? What has been the experience of school administrators, teachers, police officers, and students in Santa Monica on the topic of police officers on campus? What data or experiences point to the value of police officers on campus? What data or experiences suggest the removal of police officers from campuses? So that, I hope, gives a sense of the priorities and the direction of the committee. That we will coordinate, as Committee Chair Scott indicated. There will be collaboration among the committee chairs and with the commission chair as to how to best schedule these meetings, and also with an eye to commissioners who have multiple committee memberships and how we can schedule things to best support their participation. Chair, I suspect I'm leaving some things out that you might like covered, so feel free to let me know. But for the moment,
no, that was sufficient. All of these committees will be on the agenda going forward, so there'll be opportunities for updates and more details as we move along. Okay, let's move to the next agenda item. Ms. Parson, can you read it? 3D.
I can read it.
3E. 3E.
I got it. Use of Force System Standing Committee. Discussion of goals and agenda, information needed from Smpd, potential assignments for Inspector General, and schedule for meetings. Looking for public comment and seeing none.
Thank you. So I am the acting chair of the Use of Force Committee. I'm happy at some point to have a co-chair. Someone feels they don't have enough to do already. The way I'd like to think about our committee's work is that we want to have a public dialogue about all the important features of Santa Monica's use of force policy. And the fact of having a public dialogue with the department and with experts is part of the point of this commission. There may or may not be recommendations, as everyone has been saying. There may or may not be new recommendations coming out of it. It may be the case that Santa Monica has, on every score, has already the best policies or practices. But we believe as a commission, I think, that there is a significance and value add to having public dialogue about these important issues. And use of force systems is one of the most important aspects of policing. So what I intend to do is have one meeting per month from January through June, and likely going to be probably around 2 hours each. And the topics that I've outlined are, and the order will change, but authorization for use of force, and that's kind of the overarching principles and philosophy. Another category would be guidelines for vehicle pursuits and guidelines for foot pursuits. Another category is physical controls, personal body weapons, and that's where a subset of that would be chokeholds, for example, neck constraints. Another category is impact weapons, and under that I have tasers, batons, pepper spray, and canines. Another category is firearms and other deadly force. One of the things that I'm happy to announce is that based on my role with the Stanford Center for Racial Justice, that center is producing a model use of force policy that reflects fair, equitable, and safe policing, drawing on best practices. And the experts who have been helping us put that together are willing to come to our committee meetings and talk about each of the topics and compare to the existing Santa Monica language on those topics. So I would expect that we would want someone from the Smpd who is deeply knowledgeable about the policy and the training associated with the policies to come to the meetings. We'd want our Inspector General at the meetings and to provide input on their knowledge of best practices. And we'll walk through this systematically. So that's the and I don't have dates and specific order of topics yet, but I'll be sure to have that by the time of our January meeting. All right, Commissioner Scott.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, because that sounds really well, if the center would also avail themselves, for instance, if do they have a policy on the protest tools that I mentioned as well? I'd like to hear if
it just so happens, yeah, it just so happens we do. I also meant to say that there's some fair amount of overlap between some of the topics for your committee, and we'll figure that out as we go along. Maybe we'll have a joint committee meeting on some of the topics. All right, that's our study session items. Let's move to item 6. And Ms. Parson, can you read, as we did the last time, I think you should read all 3 of the items under staff and then see if there's public comment, and then we can go back through and get the updates.
Items 6A, B, and C, staff administrative items. 6A, receive and file status update or staff report on the status of information requested by the Commission regarding complaints, discipline, and related matters pending since June 16, 2021. 6B, receive and file status update on Commission's August 12th request to City Manager or City Attorney to provide information on the status of hiring the Inspector General to support and work at the direction of the Commission.
And C, do you have a 6C on yours? Uh-oh.
Oh, did you lose me? Or am I back?
Yeah, you froze for a second, yeah.
Back? Craig says
yes,
yeah.
You're back now. We didn't hear 6C.
6C, receive and file status update on Commission request for information from Smpd regarding recent media reports about cliques and other groups within law enforcement entities as proposed by Commissioner Centeno. And
is there any public comment?
Public comment?
None? Okay.
I saw one here, but it went down, so I'm just checking to make sure.
Okay.
And then I see Commissioner Scott's hand is up, but I don't know if it's relevant to this.
I think we want to hear the report first, and then we'll do questions after that. So let's do 6A. We've been trying to just tidy up this pending request for information. I think there was some lingering items that we weren't sure we had or not. Has that been resolved?
I have not received any additional information to provide to the Commission.
Okay, and Commissioner Devermont, I think this was this information request originated from you. Have you checked to see whether you have everything that you had asked for?
I haven't looked into the finer points of it. I knew we got a lot of Brady-related evidence, but to be honest, I haven't checked into every document yet.
So let's leave this on the agenda, and Ms. Parson, maybe you could follow up and find out what's still outstanding and who's not giving it to us. Or maybe we'll find out that there's a belief that everything has been provided. So either way would be fine. Okay, Commissioner Scott is trying to get in, so go ahead, please.
Yeah, so just to tag on to what was just mentioned, I'm wondering, is there also a way, since now you have the document of all my potential sessions, to have the current police policies ahead of time so we can have a look at it prior to the listening session as a comparison?
I think that is not off agenda, but I think we could
I'm
squeeze
sorry.
it in under 10C.
Okay. I
when
thought
we
that
get
went
to
with
it.
information.
Well, no,
and
this
information
is
about events.
this is 6A is specifically related
Okay.
to a June 16th request.
Okay, thank you.
But I like your idea. Okay, let's move to 6B, Ms. Parson. What you previously reported is that the Inspector General has been selected, that a contract has been drafted, that some people have signed and some people haven't. And we have been really hampered, the commission, by not having an Inspector General, and it's caused months of delay because we have so much that we can be productive on if we had this help. So can you tell us who, well, maybe you'll tell us that it's all signed up and ready to go, but if not, tell us who's holding it up and why.
The contractor was holding it up. They provided an incorrect form documenting their Oaks Initiative commitment. I just received the correct form moments ago. The contract has been signed by all but the city clerk, who will not sign until all the correct insurance and other information is received. That information was again received tonight. So my expectation is that the clerk's office will sign it in the next 48 to 72 hours, and we will then be able to onboard our long-awaited Inspector General.
Great. We'd love to get an introduction, and maybe, of course, the whole commission will get introduced, but I'd love to have a session with myself and the vice chair and the new Inspector General at some point. And okay, thank you for that update. 6C.
Item 6C, receive and file status update on commission request for information from Smpd regarding recent media reports about cliques and other groups within law enforcement entities.
Yes, you'll recall that this item came up at a prior meeting, and what we did with it is ask for the department to give us their views on what the issue is, if any, in the department, and how we should be thinking about it. Were we able to get some information about that?
I did not receive any information prior to this meeting, but we do have representation from the department on the meeting.
Yeah, is the Chief Batista still on?
He appears to be, yes.
Yes. So Chief, this, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but this first came up at our last meeting. It may have been after you were offline, but Commissioner Centeno had observed some news reports in other area departments about cliques, challenges with cliques within law enforcement groups. And the question we'd like some input on is how is Smpd thinking about this issue, and are there things that concern you and the like? And let me just ask Commissioner Centeno if I got that right.
Yes, thank you. Chief, a few months ago, there was some articles in the LA Times about, specifically with regard to the LA Sheriff's Department and how large it is. They discovered that there were some informal cliques that had developed within the organization, within perhaps specialized units that initially were benign and not problematic. However, as time went on, perhaps the philosophies of the department departed from these groups or units, and they started to develop their own ideology of how to enforce. And so Sheriff Villanueva was asked about it. I believe he addressed it and or is addressing it. But when I read the articles, it raised a kind of a little flag in my mind as saying, well, can something like this happen in the Santa Monica Police Department? And if so, how do we as an organization keep our finger on the pulse so that if these benign cliques begin to develop, we have a pulse on it and we can at least address it so that what started out as perhaps just officers getting together to maintain and improve morale metastasize to something that can be turned into where they're now behaving in an unlawful or a manner that is against department policy.
Commissioner Centeno, thank you for the question and the inquiry. So a couple of things I think that I'd like to bring to light. One is that I recall that this issue had been brought forward, and that prompted me to have a conversation with our command staff that's in place. So the members of our command staff have been around for over 20 years, and in their experience, the issues that were brought forward are not being practiced or experienced at the Santa Monica Police Department. So that went in line with some of my observations that I've made since the time that I've been here in walking around the police department and stopping by the work areas of different units. I have yet to see indicia of that type of affiliation, right, within specialized units, especially. Whereas where it is, I think that that kind of band of brothers, that kind of camaraderie can begin. So I have not seen it, and my command staff has said no. That's not the kind of behaviors that would be accepted in our police department, in our culture. If you ask me how it is that we would continually guard against that, I think that we continually guard against that, but by continuing to strengthen the ethos of constitutional policing, which is something that Santa Monica Police Department has always practiced, been practicing for a long time. It is through the reinforcement of our values in yearly training. It is in the continued conversations that our leadership has with our mid-level managers and our supervisors and our field operators in ensuring that they understand that those behaviors are simply not accepted and not going to be supported in this culture, in this environment. So it's a good question, and I get where you're coming from. I think that the concern of how some of these things can occur, we've certainly seen it, right, in police departments that have several thousand members, or a sheriff's office that has maybe 10,000 employees, 12,000, and you have then police substations that are isolated from the main station, and certainly a warrior culture mentality can begin to unfold in a particular area of operations that is far and away from the chain of command that is not supportive of such behaviors. I don't see that as an issue here. Although this facility looks really large, internally it's structured in a way that we are running into each other all throughout the day, in the parking lot, in the office, in the elevator. And so we have close contact with our folks. And you can see that if somebody was to start sporting a particular type of tattoo, which, oh, by the way, the tattoos, Santa Monica Police Department has a tattoo policy. So they're not wearing, visible tattoos. But, as they're walking out of the building wearing their off-duty clothes, if we were to start noticing a particular brand or style or something that would indicate that we should be focusing in on that, I have a high degree of confidence that our own folks would identify it and bring it to light. Thank you.
Hey, and I'd also like to add, the California Police Officer Standard and Training has been on this issue for quite some time now. Our former deputy chief, actually, Alvin Agus, participated in a post-training video about gangs in law enforcement and what that looked like in those types of cliques. So we've been
in that vein for a very long time and training about that. As you all may know, there is current legislation that is being produced that will make it a crime to be a type of subversive clip inside of a police department. So I believe the legislators are moving that way. We've long been that way, and we would severely punish any officers that we would find that
Thank you.
if we found a particular group like that inside of our organization.
Thank you for that that update and response. Commissioner Scott?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that on August 2nd of the summer, George, Commissioner Brown, both you and I received a letter of a complaint regarding a thin blue line flag decal on an Smpd K9 vehicle. So I'm not sure if you knew about that, Chief Bautista, but that, or you, Officer Jacobs, but we did receive a complaint regarding that, and I know that Chief Seabrooks looked into it, but the matter of the fact is the decal was on the vehicle, and that's disconcerting.
And there was a response before Chief adds to this. There was a response, an immediate response, and I believe the department did a thorough inspection of all the vehicles and removed inappropriate decals. But I guess, Commissioner Scott, you're raising the fact that the decal did exist. And so, Chief, do you want to weigh in on that?
Commissioner Brown, thank you for the opportunity to respond. So I've been in law enforcement for 35 years, as I guess many of you know by now. I have grown incredibly disappointed over the politicization of the thin blue line. Throughout my career, I never looked at it as a dividing line between ourselves and the communities that we serve. Throughout my career, I've looked at the thin blue line flag or symbol, I guess, if you want to call it, as the only thing that we owned that allowed us to think of the police officers that we have known throughout our lives that have been lost in the line of duty. And it was meant in a sense of, it represented to me a sense of honor, a sense of reverence to the people that we lost, and just our own small way of remembering that service and what that brings, thinking about the dangers that brings. And it was solely that. And so fast forward to 18 months ago, and to see different political factions using it as a wedge issue leads us to a place where folks in our communities now look at a thin blue line sticker as a divisive way of saying, see, there could be a clique or a mentality with that police department. And while I would not support the insignia or a sticker on a police car that has a thin blue line flag, I want you to know how I feel about the thin blue line and how I am disappointed in the different factions that have used this as a way to drive a wedge between public safety and the communities that we serve. It's unfortunate. It is unfortunate, and it's turned into Blue Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter, and it should have never been about that. And I'm just I'm frustrated by the way that it's viewed by the general public in some circles. I remember the event that happened where the flags were on Santa Monica police cars, and you're right, Chief Seabrooks went ahead and had the flags removed off the cars. And again, thin blue line flags, I would have been supportive of the same effort. So not that I need a response from you right now, but I would pose the question: if our patrol cars had a small American flag on it, would that raise your suspicions that our police department is somehow, leaning one particular way or another, or would that be viewed as, hey, public safety in our communities is like the most visible form of government. We believe in a democracy. Our flag is representative of our democracy. Would that be considered, in your estimation, and I guess your opinion is valued, would that be considered a sign or a symbol of some type of a divisive symbol to you, I guess? It's just a question.
Yes, if it was a Confederate flag.
Thank you, Chief.
Do I look like the guy that would be putting a Confederate flag on our police cars? Yeah, I hope not, but okay. No, not a Confederate flag, of course.
Let me call on Commissioner Devermont, and then I have Commissioner Centeno, and then Commissioner
So I don't know if we're going astray.
We are, but go ahead.
A little bit. I'll briefly respond to the Chief's question, if I may. I'm not sure it was intended for me, but I'm going to do it anyway. I would not be offended by an American flag. American flag, the state, which is a subset of the federal government. The United States flag, amongst other things, is a symbol of the United States. The thin blue line flag is an alteration of that symbol, and it's conveying a message. And what that message is less now determined by those that wish to convey it as those that would perceive it because of that I can never say the word, politicization. So unfortunately, you're right, it might be politicized. Fortunately or unfortunately, it's now communicating a speech. And because of the politicized atmosphere, that speech is now the message that is meant to be conveyed because people know the message they are conveying. Moving on. I did want to say with regards to, Commissioner Centeno probably knows more about this than me. Chief Batista, you certainly do, as does probably Deputy Chief Jacobs. With regards to cliques or the entities within the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, my understanding is those originated in the county jails, where they were first formed, the 3,000 boys. And it was from there when those deputies, because most deputies start in the jails, and then jails with the courts, and then they go out to the stations for patrol. From there, they brought those cliques to theirs, and then you had the Vikings, the Reapers, the Banditos. Santa Monica PD, although we have a small city jail, which is really the Shangri-La jails, doesn't have that experience in the county jails, and therefore I would be surprised if the cliques existed at least to the same degree.
Thank you.
And I've never heard of cliques.
Commissioner Centeno.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for your very eloquent description of what the originality of the thin blue line flag was created. I believe the NYPD or the FDNY also came out with a similar flag with the thin red line as a symbol of support and recognition after 9/11. And so, unfortunately, again, it has been politicized, and I think it's been addressed. As far as the cliques, I'm very content with your response and the response of the police department and in your review and report on my concern. And I think the commission's concerned. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for your comments, Chief. I would just add, symbols are important. Symbols are powerful. And whether we like it or not, the meaning of symbols often changes over time. So we're seeing, as part of the progress, I view it as progress, a positive evolution of this country, the removal of certain symbols that, because the meaning takes on a different or a truer context. And I'll just add one quick personal anecdote. When I was a kid, I used to ride my bike to a park way at the west end of the San Fernando Valley. It was called Orchid Ranch Park. It's still there. And in some of the tile work, there is a symbol that I saw as a swastika. So I approached the park management and I said, why on earth would there be a swastika displayed in this park? And they said to me, it's not a swastika. That is a Native American sign of peace. And the little legs on the symbol went a different direction than they do on the swastika. But other than that, it's the same. Over time, they removed that symbol, and it wasn't a slight to Native Americans. It was a bow to the reality of the interpretation of that symbol. So thanks for the opportunity to share that perspective with you.
Okay, thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Chief. We're now going to move to the next agenda item. It's going to be 10A. Ms. Parson, can you read that agenda item?
I can. 10A, discussion of the final Public Safety Reform and Oversight Commission report to City Council regarding May 31st, 2020 events, approved by the Public Safety Reform and Oversight Commission November 11th, 2021. Recommended next steps, potential decisions regarding the same, including meeting with City Council, City Manager, and Police Chief regarding recommendations.
Yep, thank you. Are there any members of the public who have indicated they want to speak on that?
Commissioner Devermont's up, but it has just gone down. No.
Okay. So the reason I put this on the agenda is because, as everyone knows, we finally passed our report at the last meeting. And I wanted to give us an opportunity to talk together about what do we want to do with this report now that it's done. Obviously, we need to send it over to City Council. Ms. Parson may have done that already. And I'm thinking we're going to want to find a mechanism to engage with the city manager, the chief, city council members about what's in the report and get their reactions and thoughts about how we might work together on some of the issues that were identified in the report going forward. So with that, what are your thoughts? Commissioner Miller.
Well, I would urge that a panel of the most involved commissioners in the drafting of the report, or perhaps even harken back to the ad hoc committee chaired by Angela Scott, which was the initial vehicle for analyzing the report. I think it's important to remember that this report was specifically requested of us by the City Council, which would then seem to logically lead to some kind of presentation from the Commission to the Council. And I would also urge that the report be sent out with a press release cover. And I think that this Commission really does need to intensify its efforts at communication to the public. And this seems like a good place to start.
Any other ideas? No ideas? I agree, Commissioner Miller, that we should ask the City Council for an opportunity to appear at a council meeting and discuss the report. I think that's a good idea. I think we also need to meet with the chief and the city manager because there's aspects of the report that would be relevant to each of them. Obviously, maybe even the city attorney. Now that I see their cameras come on. So on a press release, I'm not so sure about. Not sure how we'd actually pull that off. I'm sure any individual commissioner could send it to the press if they don't have it already, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, Chair, I didn't want to interrupt, but I'd be cautious about encouraging individual press releases and communications. I think it's it should be official.
Chair Brown, if I may.
Yeah.
So the city does have a policy on the transmittal of material from a board or a commission to an outside agency or entity. This board, of course, can, in unison through vote, transmit the report as it has done or other items to council. But there is a prohibition on the commission doing so to an outside agency. And I believe a press release would fall under that policy. Having said that, the commission or you as chair or the vice chair could work with the staff liaison and the communications staff to discuss, going forward what your expectations would be or desire would be of council, and then council through the mayor pro tem could set a 13 item or otherwise. But additionally, if it is desired that each individual commissioner communicate something to either the press or an outside entity, that commissioner would be speaking in his or her or their own individual capacity, as opposed to speaking on behalf of the commission.
Yeah. Well, I certainly don't think that would be desirable. I guess as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking that perhaps the chair and vice chair should work with Ms. Parson and arrange for the various meetings with the individuals I mentioned, and also to request that we get on the city council agenda. Commissioner Vice Chair Devermont, do you have a view on that?
I think that's a great idea. I believe that Ms. Parson could get on that immediately and give it its due weight and recognizes how important it is, but I don't want to speak for her, obviously.
I'm happy to get on that immediately.
Okay.
I will be emailing you both shortly.
Good. All right. Well, if there's no further comments, I'm going to move to the next agenda item.
All right.
Okay. Agenda item 10B.
Agenda item 10B, request for Smpd to investigate potential misconduct revealed in September 9th, 2020 testimony to the Public Safety Reform and Oversight Commission. And we will, of course, pause for public comment.
Okay. No public comment?
Seeing none.
Okay. There's a typo in the agenda, by the way. It's September 9th, 2021. And at the September 9th, 2021 regular meeting of this commission, we had some, at the very end, in the time for open public comment, we had some detailed and dramatic testimony from two Santa Monica residents about incidents that occurred on May 31. And I'd like to, I wanted to get it on the agenda because I want to ask the chief, well, I'll start with the chief, if he's been made aware of that and what he intends to do about it. And just for the record, let me call out a couple of the items. So if you look at the September 9th video, it's split into chapters. And chapter 1 and 2. Chapter 1 is the first part of the meeting. Chapter 2 is the end. And the first piece of testimony starts at about 22 and a half minutes into it. And a woman, Ms. Brown, who's a Santa Monica resident, wanted to tell her personal story. And she said she was on 4th and Santa Monica Boulevard, trapped in the middle of a lot of activity, and she was very concerned. And she said as she was crossing the street, she looked over her shoulder and saw a police officer had raised his rifle and pointed it at her. She then said she saw another officer put their hand on the first officer's shoulder and got the person to lower the gun. She said she was very, she said she asked, "Are you going to shoot me?" And she said she didn't understand what was in that officer's mind. She also indicated that she was very traumatized by the experience. Following that, at about 23 minutes and 13 seconds into chapter 2 of the September 9th video, Ms. Frazier offered some testimony. She said on behalf of her daughter, who had an experience, her daughter was shot and pepper sprayed during the May 31 protests. She said her daughter was with a group of people quietly protesting. She said officers that knew who she was instructed her to go to the other side and help quiet a louder crowd. In particular, she said her daughter was greeted by 2 police officers, and she knew one of them because she had been a PAL participant. He told her to go towards the area of where the crowd was, where there was some looting activity and the crowd was more rowdy. Her daughter started walking and then was shot with rubber bullets and then pepper spray. She said her daughter has a history of seizures and could have been seriously injured by the incident. And she was personally very angry that this happened. There was further testimony by someone who's maybe on the call tonight, Ms. Leslie, and she said that she basically corroborated the facts because she drove to pick up the daughter of Ms. Frazier and got a report on what had happened close in time to that event. That's around 29 minutes into the video. So Chief, I don't want us as a commission to lose track of this event, and so I want to start by asking whether you had been made aware of that before, and what the department will do to look into this, if they haven't already.
Excuse me, Chair, this is Joe Lawrence. I'm going to have to jump in here now. Although the proposed changes to the ordinance that set up the commission have yet to be voted on by the City Council, they're supposed to be reflective. They're in the main are designed to clarify the current law, and under the change, which is supposed to just clarify the existing law. I just want to point out that the commission, I'm going to read what is 2.50.040B, which says the commission will not participate in disciplinary investigation proceedings or actions or sit on promotional boards and may not make recommendations regarding the initiation of any disciplinary investigation, the imposition of discipline in any individual discipline, the imposition of discipline in any individual disciplinary action or any individual promotion. So what I recommend that the commission do is just merely bring this to the attention of the police department, perhaps encourage, and then it goes on to say, I should say, the commission may also refer individuals to the Smpd to submit complaints. So I think you can bring this to the police department's attention in a kind of like, we heard this, here it is, do with it what you will, and ask.
Well, thank you, City Attorney. You are referring to a draft language that's in the proposed ordinance. Is that correct?
I'm reading from the ordinance that's going to be considered on
next
Tuesday, but this change is supposed to be merely clarifying the existing mission of the commission. And so I'm saying that you're kind of going off in a direction that is, I think you should,
I
you're going
understand
off in
what
a
you're
direction
saying.
that I think you should pause on. And I think instead you should just bring this to the attention, as you have now, to the police department and to the police chief. You can also encourage these individuals to file complaints. And I think you should leave it at that, not ask him what he's going to do about it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your opinion. I will say that I do have objections to that language in the proposed ordinance to the extent it purports to say that the commission cannot assert things that they're complaining about to the police. I think it's not enforceable as a practical matter and could lead to some absurd results. That said, I'm not proposing tonight that the commission file a complaint, but if you think about it, it would be absurd if we couldn't say, we got a report that an officer pointed a rifle at a woman crossing the street, but I can't tell you about it or ask you about it or ask you to do anything because of something that's written in the ordinance. I just don't think that is going to work as a practical matter. And so, but let me just say this. What I asked the chief is whether he heard about the incident and what he intends to do about it. That's not a commission action. That's me asking him a question as a chair of the commission.
I appreciate that you asking the question. It's the what do you intend to do about it portion of the question that I think is skirting the line you don't need to skirt. And so you could bring it to his attention. You could be upset about what you saw, and you could say, I think the police department should be aware of this and do whatever it wishes to do about it. But asking him what he intends to do about it is that he'll follow whatever protocol the police department has about it.
I understand, and I respectfully disagree. I think the form of the question is consistent with the revised ordinance that's not adopted yet, but I don't think that matters because I think that the matter is so important that we're going to need to ask these kinds of questions over the years. I also think it would be absurd in a case of a serious incident if the commission said, if the rule was that the commission can't do anything other than make a vague suggestion or help someone fill out a form. So anyways, I feel, as you can see, I feel strongly about it. So I want to go back to my question to the chief. Have you heard about this incident, and what, if anything, have you already done or do you expect to do about it?
Commissioner, thank you for bringing that to my attention. We will follow protocol and make a determination to what's been purported, which you have just mentioned to me. We'll take it from there.
Appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman,
want to speak?
Mr.
Commissioner Devermont, yes, please.
May I see clarity from Mr. City Attorney Lawrence? Would that be all right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, City Attorney Lawrence, the proposed ordinance is not, as of tonight, law. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct. The proposed ordinance is not law, but the changes reflected in the ordinance are intended to clarify the existing law. And so while the language is different, there is nothing in the existing law. I will leave it at that.
The ordinance, if passed, will not be retroactive, will it?
It will not be retroactive.
Okay. And I believe the ordinance states that we cannot suggest for an investigation as a result of conduct, correct? Am I wrong? Is that what you read?
I'll read what I read.
Thank you.
You want me to read it again?
If you don't mind.
The commission will not participate in disciplinary investigations, proceedings, or actions, or sit on promotional boards, and may not make recommendations regarding the initiation of any individual disciplinary investigation, the imposition of discipline in any individual disciplinary action, or individual promotions. The commission may also refer individuals to the Smpd to submit complaints through the Smpd's established procedures for receiving and addressing complaints about the conduct of Smpd officers, and may provide to individuals information regarding how to submit such complaints.
So I believe the chair's question was, and maybe I'm wrong, was to the chief was, are you aware of this? That's not suggesting action. And
Right.
what, if anything, are you going to do about it? Which is not suggesting action, it's asking if there's going to be action.
It's also not a commission action.
I know. Where am I wrong?
I believe I said it's the what do you intend to do about it portion of the question that was skirting an issue that did not need to be dealt with. People could interpret that different ways, certainly as implying you better do something about it. But anyway, it doesn't need to do, you could bring it to the police department's attention. I think that's perfectly appropriate. I think you can encourage the individuals to file a complaint. That's perfectly appropriate. What the police department does with it is up to the police department. Now,
Thank you, City Attorney. I didn't mean to cut you off. Thank you. No more questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. This may become an ongoing issue. We're going to want to know what happens with this set of facts, but the issue itself is important because the ordinance creates some challenges with respect to our ability to do our job. It's as you can see from our discussion, it's easily circumvented in the sense that it only prohibits the commission acting as a body from making a recommendation on something. It cannot prevent us from asking questions. That would just be absurd. And we need to bring that to council's attention, city council's attention for next Tuesday. I don't want to stray off the agenda item, but.
By the way, this is what happens when you get too many lawyers.
Yeah. Commissioner Centeno, please.
Yeah, thank you. A question for a city attorney. I believe the chair has stated that he disagrees with the ordinance as it exists and the proposed clarification that is going to be brought in. And then I believe he asked the chief, well, basically, what are you going to do about it? And my concern is, if he's violating the settlement agreement as a result of the unfair labor practice brought on by the POA, and the POA then filed a secondary lawsuit, I should just like to go on record that, and there was injunctive relief imposed, I would like to just immune myself that I do not agree with the chair and the direction he's going.
Well, let's say that. Let me first respond and then get the city attorney to weigh in. I disagree with the proposed ordinance that hasn't been adopted yet, if it intends to restrict our ability to ask questions as individual commissioners. I don't believe the city attorney opined that my asking a question violated the existing ordinance. I think he was making a suggestion, but I'll put that to the city attorney. Do you think anything that happened here today violated the ordinance, existing ordinance?
I'm going to say that I said what I said, that namely that the commission should be mindful that of the language of the ordinance that sets the parameters of what your authority is, and that the proposed ordinance is intended to clarify what your current authority is, and it indicates that you should not be that you should avoid asking a question, or you should avoid inserting yourselves into individual potential disciplinary matters, or directing the department to do particular things. And so beyond that, I'm not going to give an opinion as to whether something might violate or not violate the ordinance.
That's helpful. And to further clarify where I'm coming from, I'm not asking specifically for something specific to be done about a particular officer. I'm asking from the victim's point of view that this thing happened to these two women, not to mention others that were in the crowd that got pepper sprayed and shot at with rubber bullets. So I'm asking about the incident, and we have to be able to ask about incidents. Hopefully there won't be too many of them, but there will be future incidents, and we need to have the ability to ask about them. Commissioner Palazzolo, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just I'm a little confused here. The City Council is what created this commission. I assume that we work for the City Council. Well, we work for the people, but under the direction of the City Council, is it not proper that we follow their dictates?
Absolutely. And what I'm saying to you is I don't believe anything's happened here that would violate the ordinance or the upcoming ordinance.
Is correct. And the proposed ordinance isn't law, so we haven't anything yet. And I would also say, and I don't mean to interject, but the city attorney's office currently represents us, so let's not try and bully him into saying we did something wrong publicly.
Commissioner Scott.
And I would like to add, although, like you had mentioned, Erica Leslie is not here, I was actually speaking on the phone to Erica Leslie at the time that she had picked up Waverly, who had just been shot. And so I actually spoke to Waverly myself. I didn't want to have to go there in this and reveal all that, but I can say that I spoke to her at the moment that she did get shot, and we were worried about whether or not to take her to the hospital because, like you said, she does suffer from seizures. So in this volleying back and forth of legalese and all of that, I'm compelled, I also feel that same way, and I'll just say that I was in tears at the time that it happened. And so, yes, I'm concerned. I hope there's some kind of a follow-up. I'll just say that. And that is it. I yield back my time. But I just wanted to say that I can also testify that it did occur because I was on the phone with her. Y'all can check my phone logs if you want in that time frame. But yes, thank you.
And Chief, I would like to suggest that it's going to be important, I think. It could be extremely valuable for you and the department to pay attention when people show up from the public at our meetings. These women waited, 3 hours to the very end of our meeting when we asked, is there anything else that anybody would like to say? And when people show up and say, yeah, something bad happened to me, I think it would be a very good move if we didn't have to then a couple months later, and I know you weren't here in September, but if we didn't have to ask a couple months later, are you going to do anything about something that a member of the public came to the commission and talked about, that they've been holding inside of them for a long time? And so I just want to encourage you and all of us to think about, so how are we going to deal with this? People are going to show up at our meetings and they're going to say something happened to me. And I think it would be good if the police department took concerns of people who show up and do that seriously and try to figure out what to do about it. So anyways, we can quibble about the language in the ordinance and what we're permitted to do and not permitted to do. But we've got to address these kinds of things as they come up. And yes, please, Chief.
You know, I really appreciate your suggestions. I think that by now, maybe it's too early for folks on the call or those listening to us to perhaps trust that that I am the kind of police chief that will follow our ordinance as it's outlined, and at the same time will be attentive to the moments in time when a complaint comes forward through this venue, that we will be attentive and we will be listening, and that when those things come to our attention, if it falls within the purview of the ordinance, that we should contact them because something has come forward. Rest assured, I don't think you've heard me convey anything that would lead you to believe that we would not listen to those concerns that are coming from the public through your commission meetings, through this venue. So I hope that as time goes by, we don't have to raise the rhetoric of insinuating that our department would not be sensitive to the needs of our community, and especially those that feel aggrieved in some type of contact with our officers, because we are fully committed to ensuring that we are transparent and caring in our interactions with our community. We care deeply about the members of our city. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let us move to the next agenda item. It is 10C. Ms. Parson.
10C, discussion and action regarding initial assignments for Inspector General.
Okay, I wanted to get this on the agenda so that we could start to map out what we'd like the Inspector General to do. I think since our Inspector General is not quite on board yet, maybe we'll roll this over to the next to the next meeting. But if there are any kind of current comments on it, open to hearing your thoughts on how we should. We can't have all of us 11 people calling the Inspector General with requests. So we're going to have to find a way to organize our requests and channel the work. So if you have thoughts now, let's hear them. Otherwise, keep thinking about it. I'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting. Commissioner Rahman.
Chair Brown, will there be an initial meeting with all of us with the Inspector General?
At a minimum, it will be at one of our regular, hopefully at our next regular meeting, the person will be there. There's an opportunity to meet before that. I'll let everyone know, but at a minimum, right?
So at a minimum, it won't be until January, right?
I think as a practical matter, that's probably what we're looking at now.
Thank you.
Commissioner Scott.
And I'm wondering also, with respect to how we funnel up these requests, perhaps they would go through, if you're on a standing committee, it goes through either the chair or the vice chair of that either standing or ad hoc committee. It's discussed there first and go through that channel. So that way everyone kind of has an idea of what's being funneled up, and maybe it'll be more than one or two requests, but more so organized structure in that way. And then maybe we funnel it up to you and then it goes further. That's just a suggestion.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. I think we're nearing the end. Can we move to agenda item 11? That is general public input on matters that were not on the agenda. So, Ms. Parson, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak?
I am checking and I do not see any hands raised.
Okay. Well, thank you, commissioners. It's been a good and thorough meeting. Had a little bit of lively discussion there near the end. And I'll look forward to the committee meetings rolling out and our next meetings. Yes, Commissioner Roman?
Sorry, Chair. I don't know if this is out of agenda or out of course or whatever it is. Since you know how we had the training class for the community academy and it stopped?
Yeah, well, we're off agenda. Yeah, we're off agenda, but I think we can deal with it offline. If you're talking about when are we going to restart the training, let's follow up with that offline.
Thank you.
So contact me and or Lisa.
Okay, I'll contact you.
Okay. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Happy holidays, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Happy holidays. Bye.
So yeah. I thought he was going to.
Bye, everyone.